Cultures from all over the world have practiced human sacrifice, from the Vikings in Europe to the Aztecs in America and the Dahomey of Africa, as well as countless others on every continent of the globe. Why did all of these very diverse cultures all follow the same barbaric custom? Simple, because their gods told them to. Their prophets and mediums and shamans and medicine men, they go by many names, communicated with some entities claiming to be gods, and these entities told them that they would bless them or favor them in some way if they would murder their neighbors. The Bible says that the Lord of this world is Satan. In other words, the political and economic power of the world is, in general, held by Satan and the people and evil spirits who follow him, until the time when Jesus comes again and sets up his kingdom upon the earth. Now, why should we believe the Bible? Well, here's another question. What's the alternative? We know that governments and media lie and manipulate and create false stories every day. Even science is for sale to whomever happens to be the highest bidder. Governments, companies, religious groups, media organizations, and scientific theories have come and gone countless times over the millennia, but the Bible remains. The Bible may not be perfect, but you have to believe in something. And it's the source of wisdom that has withstood the test of time. Other ancient sources of wisdom tell similar stories. Anyway, this could be a long discussion, and maybe we'll go into it in more depth later on, but back to the topic at hand. Satan and his demons rule the world. They set up political leaders in their positions of power and reward them for doing their bidding. Remember how Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. Satan came to Jesus and offered power and glory if he would serve him. Many other people have gotten the same proposition. Serve me and I will make you rich, powerful, and famous. Some of these people said yes. Some of these people are this very day occupying positions of power in governments, corporations, media, education, religious institutions, and every other institution of influence and power on the earth. We don't know because we fail to study the spiritual. The propaganda machine pushes atheism and materialism on us. It tries to make us worship science. Of course, the same forces control establishment science as well. Even the religious structures are infiltrated. Every source of influence over the human mind is a target. Religious institutions are no exception. If you want to learn something mind-blowing, do some research on how the Lutheran Church funded left-wing terrorists in the 1970s. I bet you never learned about that in school. Naturally, the education system is also compromised. But back to religion. Have you noticed that mainstream Christianity has basically thrown out everything spiritual from its belief systems? They've become almost the same as the atheists. Have you also noticed that a large part of the people who control the world belong to so-called fraternal organizations such as the Freemasons? Go read some books written by the Masons sometime. They're up to their neck in spiritual and occult philosophy. They aren't atheists. In fact, they explicitly prohibit idiots, madmen, and atheists from becoming Masons. Their propaganda machines try to convince you to be an atheist, but they certainly are not themselves. And if you are, they think of you as equivalent to an idiot or a madman. Now, this doesn't mean that the world is exclusively controlled by Masons, or even that the Masons are necessarily evil. It just shows that the people at the top do not believe the same things that they want you to believe. They understand spirituality, mediumship, and how to make deals with spirits to advance their ambitions. But they want you to think that's all just a bunch of outdated superstition. That way they have the upper hand, and you have no way of defending yourself against their manipulations. Now back to human sacrifice. The elites of antiquity talked to evil spirits through intermediaries known as mediums, oracles, shamans, druids, and many other names. Basically, people who have a special ability for communicating with spirits. The evil spirits often called themselves gods and demanded to be worshipped and obeyed. In return for worship and obedience, these demons would offer power and status to their most faithful servants. These evil spirits thrive on pain, suffering, and death. particularly violent and premature death. So they command their human servants to sacrifice their fellow humans. The fact that human sacrifice was practiced throughout nearly all human cultures is testament to the fact that the same spirits were operating in the same way in all parts of the world. Okay, but what's changed? Where have these spirits in the practice of human sacrifice gone now? Fast forward to the early 2000s. The USA is at the top of the pyramid in world political, economic, and military power. There are two political parties in the USA, the party of war and the party of abortion. Yes, this is a simplification, but a useful one. One party vocally and wholeheartedly supported mass murder through war under the most ridiculous false pretenses. The same party complained loudly about abortion in public, but did nothing to stop it. The other party openly and vocally supported abortion. At the same time, they publicly complained about war. But they had voted for the wars in the first place and voted to continue them later. The American people, meanwhile, totally went along with it. Almost all of them fell neatly into supporting either the party of war or the party of abortion. And so both forms of mass human sacrifice continued and expanded beyond the wildest dreams of the so-called gods of the Aztecs and the Vikings. People had rejected human sacrifice under the name of human sacrifice, and that does show some progress in humanity's moral evolution. But they were easily tricked into supporting the same crimes against humanity as long as the devil's servants came up with a nice enough sounding tagline to put on it, like right to choose or spreading democracy. By the way, political research groups pour countless hours and dollars into studying exactly what word choices work best for manipulating public opinion. If you want to see what I mean, do a web search for Frank Luntz. So, human sacrifice has not gone anywhere. It is alive and well, hiding under different names and pretty-sounding rationalizations. War and abortion are far from the only forms of sacrifice, by the way. That's why I said I was simplifying. Drugs, suicide, euthanasia, cancer-causing chemicals in our food. The devil has many tools. Anyway, this was going well for the forces of Satan. Left foot, right foot, stepping in the same direction. Ever more death and suffering. Then something unexpected happened. Someone appeared. A human wrecking ball with strange hair and a strange way of speaking. And people flocked to him. He wasn't an extremist or very political at all, really. He was just a reflection of what the average person felt and believed. He took the middle road on most of the issues of the day. He supported immigration, but wanted it to be controlled. He supported gay rights, but didn't want a radical agenda forced on children. He supported the citizens' right to own weapons, but with some limits. But this strange man with the strange haircut did something truly revolutionary. He took action to end both war and abortion at the same time. In doing so, he brought half the country with him. The party of war suddenly turned into the party of peace. A party that opposed all types of mass human sacrifice. A party that could finally be worthy of the title pro-life. The party of abortion, almost by necessity, then became the party of both abortion and war. Most people are tribal animals, after all, and will support whatever they're told their side is supposed to support. So in a very short period of time, the political climate had turned from one of evil versus evil, pretending to be enemies but actually working together, to one of good versus evil, life versus death. Of course, the man with the strange hair was quickly removed from the system, but the damage had been done. The old party of war versus party of abortion dichotomy had been turned on its head. The party of war had become the party of life, and they didn't want to switch back. At the same time, something else very interesting was happening. The Christians and the Muslims had been taught, very effectively, to be enemies of one another. Satan has many servants who pretend to be Christian and many who pretend to be Muslim, and a few well-placed acts of violence from their fake Christian followers against real Muslims and from their fake Muslim followers against real Christians serve this task well. Meanwhile, the Christians, and especially those Christians from what was until recently the party of war, had been well conditioned to believe that a certain country, represented by a six-pointed star, was its dearest ally. But the Christians had started to see that perhaps something else was going on, and they started to find a little bit of common ground with the Muslims, who they found were also not particularly happy about the idea of their children being brainwashed into thinking they should permanently mutilate their bodies in order to look sort of like the other gender. And they started to realize that just maybe some of the reasons they had become enemies in the first place were not so legitimate after all. It was precisely at that moment of awakening that the event occurred. An event masterfully orchestrated by the forces of Satan to bring the party of life back to being the party of war, and at the same time to cut off any nascent sympathy between the Christians and the Muslims. It was perfect. It was impeccably marketed to appeal to decent human beings. Save the children, duty to our allies, protect freedom and democracy. All neatly wrapped up into one package. Will this new party of life fall for it? Will they take the bait? Or will they remember how many times they've been lied to in the past and resist the propaganda? Only time will tell.